financially from his son's overseas business dealings. Sophia Crowder is the new Miss Black Kentucky for 2024. The Women's Club of Louisville held the event Sunday where 3 Louisville natives swept titles. Alina Gordon took the Miss Black Teen crown while Sierra Johnson won for Miss Division. Crowder will represent the state in the Miss Black USA pageant next year. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Reports now of a brush fire in Hawthorne, 105 eastbound before Prairie Avenue. That's along the right shoulder. You're seeing traffic stopped coming off the 405. And 105 east at Imperial Highway, we have a traffic break being run with all lanes stopped. 405 north at Sherman Way, all lanes still blocked, investigating an accident, slowing from the 101.
Get big savings and big rewards during Provember. Save $80 on the DeWalt 20-volt 2-tool combo kit and earn 3 times the bonus points. While supplies last, selection varies by location. Bonus points calculated before taxes and fees after applicable discounts, if any. Valid through 11/22, subject to change.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man.
All 4 of LA's major pro teams were in action Sunday. The Clippers and Chargers get a win. The Rams and Lakers came up short. The Lakers lost by 5 in overtime in Sacramento. The loss spoiled a monster game from Anthony Davis, 30 points, 16 rebounds, 3 blocked shots, and 2 steals. LeBron had 27 but committed 8 turnovers. The Clippers beat San Antonio by 40 at Crypto.com, 21 points from Kawhi Leonard, 19 each from Paul George and Russell Westbrook. The Chargers beat Chicago to improve to 3-4, 2 interceptions by the Chargers defense. The Rams lost by 23 at Dallas. They fall to 3-5. Quarterback Matthew Stafford may have suffered a broken right thumb. The Rams hope to know more about the extent of his injury later today. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Environmental justice, pollution, and climate. In Los Angeles and across America, people of color are suffering and dying from disproportionate health impacts on a planet that has less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage. Heat illnesses, respiratory illnesses, water-related illnesses, food system impacts, insect-related diseases, Black maternal health, and mental health effects. As the impacts of climate change mount, millions of vulnerable people, our people, are going to bear the brunt of these extreme environmental events, which will likely lead to forced displacement, loss of cultural identity, and other related risks. These realities are as real as rain. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details about the most progressive multimedia and live events campaign any Black media outlet has ever undertaken to combat the climate catastrophe. Experts, events, empowerment. It's all on the way from unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580. We don't black down. We level up.
Level up, 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 level up.
Yeah, it's for the people. This is street radio for unsung hero. Riding in the Rego, trying to stay legal. My daughter found Nemo, I found a new primo. Yeah, you know how we do it for the people and the struggle of the brothers and the folks. The lovers of the dope, experiment to discover hope. Scuffle for notes, the rougher I wrote, times was harder. Went from rock started to the voice of a martyr. Why white folk focus on dogs and yoga. My people on the low end trying to ball and get over. Lyrics are like liquor for the fallen soldier. From the bounce to the house.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm delighted to have you listening to our program today, our final hour today, in fact. I started out 2 hours ago saying we were going to try to squeeze an 80-pound show into a 45-pound bag. The squeeze continues. 7 guests today, not something I do every day. But it's been a great 2 hours. I look forward to this final excellent third hour. In this hour, 2 conversations on the B side of this hour. Today, President Joe Biden issued a sweeping executive order on AI, artificial intelligence. We'll talk to Dr. Joy Bolamwini about the revelatory work she's doing to address the myriad challenges of AI, specifically facial recognition, which we are told is fraught with deeply ingrained biases. We'll talk about that on the backside of this hour. We commenced this hour, though, with this. In 1857, a woman escaped enslavement on a North Carolina plantation and fled to a farm in New York. In hiding, she worked on a manuscript that would make her famous long after her death. The novel, The Bondswoman Narrative, was first published in 2002 to great acclaim, but the author's identity remained unknown. Professor Greg Hekimovich unraveled the mystery of the author's name over a decade later, and in The Life and Times of Hannah Crafts, he finally tells her story. Greg Hekimovich, good to have you on this program. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Tavis. Thank you so much for having me on the program to talk about Hannah Crafts.
Oh, no, it's my great delight to have you on. I know Skip Gates. I've known Skip well, and matter of fact, through my own publishing imprint, I published one of Skip's books years ago. So he and I have known each other for decades, of course, and I came to know this story courtesy of Skip, Henry Louis Skip Gates Jr., Harvard University. Everybody knows Skip. I came to first know of this story because of him, but as I mentioned, you did the work and did the research to find out who this woman actually was, and you've been rewarded for that work, not just with a great book, but with a book that has a foreword by Henry Louis Gates Jr. So tell me about your coming into the light of this story, and then we'll talk about the research you did to unpack who this woman really was.
Oh, my pleasure. I heard about this story when it was published in 2002. I was very interested, immediately read the novel, and like most people at the time, I was blown away. It struck me as a work of genius, and like everybody else, I wanted to know who wrote the book. So Dr. Gates had done just amazing work sort of setting the foundation for discovering the author. He was able to identify the enslaver, John Hill Wheeler, from which the author escaped. And I used that for the next 20 years. It was 10 years doing the research and then following up to pinpoint and actually discover her life story. And I'll just say that depended really on going into the descendant communities of eastern North Carolina in Bertie County and in Hertford County, and spending a lot of time listening, going into people's basements, going into their parlors, and just listening as they were able to uncover bits and pieces of this history that they had in their attics or in the oral history passed down. So it took a long time, but with that work, we were able to discover and really recover her fascinating life in this biography.
No, we are forever indebted to you for spending 2 decades to do this. But let me just start with this question. It's a personal question, and I could ask it of anyone who spends years working on a particular project. But why would you spend 20 years of your life researching who this black woman was, and you ain't even black? I ain't mad at you. Again, we owe you a debt. But tell me why a white guy spends 20 years of his life trying to find out who this black writer was.
Right. It's the same reason anybody would become obsessed with a history that they wanted to uncover. Mm-hmm. So when I read that novel, it was profound to me that this escaped woman, somebody who suffered one of the most difficult lives you could imagine, was able to write a joyous novel, a novel that demonstrated extraordinary literacy and artistic achievement. And I just had to know who that was. And, I completely understand the idea that a white male scholar wouldn't necessarily be thought of the person to do this, but I do think it's important to remember it's part of a continuity of time. So this manuscript, written by a woman who was a child born of rape by a white man and an enslaved woman, that manuscript got handed down to her mixed-race stepson, who then gave it to her white landlady, who sold it to a book dealer, who got it to the greatest African-American librarian of the 20th century, Dorothy Porter Wesley, and then somehow the manuscript ended up in the hands of Henry Louis Gates Jr., and then me and a bunch of other scholars worked on it. So it's really this powerful team project, right, over generations, and I'm just very grateful to have had the opportunity to spend that much time really learning from Hannah, listening to descendant communities, and then uncovering that genius that I first experienced there, how to make a beautiful and joyful life out of the difficulties and fractures of slavery.
No, we are grateful to you. You are grateful for the opportunity, and we're grateful that you took the opportunity to write the book. It's called The Life and Times of Hannah Crafts, the true story of the bondwoman's narrative. The author is Greg Ekamovich, and when we come forward, we'll talk about Hannah Crafts. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac perfection like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Feel it, beloved, clearly, we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac, Cadillac, Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com. Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. I was able to speak with one of the panelists, the owner of Kids Love. Take a listen.
So Kids Love, KIDSLUV, is a first-to-market zero-sugar, vitamin-enhanced functional beverage for kids.
So the zero sugar is really important because if not, the sugar gets on the teeth, it can cause cavities. So as a mom, I love this vitamins and hydration in one. Tell us what's happening here with Chase Bank today.
So I would say, I think what Chase is trying to do is create a community actually for entrepreneurs, a place where people can go. They have the space to do it. It's a beautiful space. And to be able to have these conversations. There are so many benefits to being a women-owned and certified business, from a standpoint of getting into stores, not paying the slotting fees of what it takes to be in stores. So I think Chase is trying to bring awareness to a lot of the things that people just don't know about, that not only the bank can help, but outside of the bank, their relationships can help create.
That's beautiful. And I know, this is how we build equity in communities of color, is kind of spreading that information and that knowledge. So thank you for being here today and doing your part and letting these women know that it is possible.
For KBLA 1580, I'm Maisha Cairo in the community with Chase.
My mom has decided to learn to paint, and she's good.
My dad's now into creative cuisine, and I've already put on 6 pounds.
Learning new things comes with age.
My mom, she started forgetting my name and what we're talking about.
Forgetting well-known things doesn't. Memory loss may be a sign of Alzheimer's disease. Early detection gives you and your loved one time to plan for the future. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Greg Ekamovich, and I'm delighted to have him on. In 2001, the earliest known novel written by an African-American woman, in case you've just tuned in, was Discovery. But for years, many were skeptical of its origins, and Greg Ekamovich, a literary scholar, was able to verify the manuscript and has written a book detailing that journey called The Life and Times of Hannah Crafts, the true story of the bondwoman's narrative. And I'm honored once again to have him on this program to talk about the search, his detailed search for the first black woman novelist. That said, Greg, take the mic and tell me about Hannah Crafts.
Right. Hannah Crafts, as you noted, was America's first black female novelist. And against all odds, she was a New York Times best-selling writer, too. When Dr. Gates discovered that in the manuscript and authenticated it, couldn't identify the actual writer, but published it in 2002 to great acclaim. She was born as Hannah Bond on the plantation of Lewis Bond in Indian Woods, North Carolina. And as I said, she was a child of rape by a white father, and her planter father was named Lewis Bond. And her mother was a mixed-race woman named Hannah Sr. in slave inventories. She was orphaned at the age of 10 and brought up to be a house servant. And during her childhood, she stole literacy, a practice she continued later when she came to serve female college students in nearby Murfreesboro, North Carolina. In 1856, in Washington, D.C., she began writing a novel that she stole. She stole paper from her captor, John Hill Wheeler. We have the forensic evidence of her writing the novel on that paper she stole and smuggled out of slavery. And she did escape in May 1857, completed her novel in 1858, and then it's just such a wonderful story. She ended up marrying and living a very happy life afterwards, and that manuscript passed down through a very dear stepson. As she found from her broken life, she put a family together out of slavery. And it's just really inspiring. That's a part of the story we didn't know. And doing that research, I was able to discover just it's a joyous end to her novel. And she was kind of writing what she was pursuing when she wrote that novel out of the bits and pieces of scraps of her life.
I'm struck by. I'm not naive, but of course about the history. But I'm struck, Greg, by your telling of the story of how she had to literally steal paper to write this story.
Yes, when I entered this scholarship, I was skeptical. You know, there are laws against it, but what scholars have known are there's free-floating pockets of literacy, and in her circumstances, there was literacy within the plantation communities where she grew up in Bertie County. And this, again, goes to descendant communities. A set of family members shared with me, Albert Bishop, Walter Cray, shared with me a document that was discovered in their great-grandmother's house later that they didn't know about, where she talks about the literacy and the neighboring plantation to where Hannah Bond grew up. Later on in life, she ended up in a highly literate home, a literate home that also included boarding college students from a nearby Baptist female college. One of the things I do in my research is uncover how is it so accomplished in its literary formations. And what you can trace in this fabulous way is the way in which the women she served were practicing college composition exercises. She was following those models, learning from them, and then making it her own by telling the story of slavery. It's absolutely astounding.
You raised a point a moment ago that many people have not really paid attention to or taken time to wrestle with. We have this image, we have this notion that all slaves were illiterate. And to your point, there were pockets of literacy, so that we now know that all slaves were not necessarily illiterate, unable to read or write.
Yes, and it's what I think it's surprising to many people, and I answered my research with, there is a complete record of trying to shut down literacy, but you had this other sort of great awakening, this real religious awakening that was in a way encouraged for a period. And this is where Hannah Crafts, her family, literacy was not completely shut down in their specific community, and there was a real religious life that captured and was engaged with evangelical religion that was really deeply a part of this novel. It's no surprise she ends up in freedom, becoming a school teacher and somebody very engaged in the AME Church in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. This book, the book you've written about Hannah Crafts and her times, is really set against the backdrop of our slide into the Civil War. You've talked about her a bit. I could have asked this question, and perhaps should have asked it earlier. Set the scene for me. What's happening in America around this time?
Yes, well, really important to her life is Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831.
Mm-hmm.
Her enslaver, John Hill Wheeler, and this wasn't known, it's not in the literature, but when I dug into the archival history family papers, his family helped put down that revolt. And there was an extraordinary spasm of violence that was a part of her childhood. Lynch violence that I was able to trace within her own family, her own grandmother. This sort of violence was disturbing. And when many people first engaged this book, they saw what they saw as a sort of exaggerated violence, but not at all the case. She was living through that, and that was during her life. There was a continued response and fear of further revolt. And what she did, and what I write about in the novel, is she found pockets of literacy and an underground network through eventually when she ended up living in Washington, D.C., the first colored Baptist church of Washington, D.C. It was a congregation that was separated from the First Baptist Church by a connected enslaver. That little pocket there helped spirit away a lot of people, including Jane Johnson, another person I write about in the book. I'll just add one more thing.
Sure.
The book really explores this network of people she lived with. So it's not just her life that I'm trying to recover here. I was able to engage the other enslaved women whose stories she also used to write her novel. And I want to name here Millie and Martha Murphy, Eliza Morgan, Mary Burton, and this figure that many African-American historians know, Jane Johnson, who was really important.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about how Hannah Crafts ends up or decides, in fact, to use, if I can put it this way, her literary skills to push back against this institution of slavery, to push back against the dehumanizing ways that many were subject to who looked like her.
So I love this question because it's there in the novel, and there's a scene in the novel, it's the showstopper of the book, where Mrs. Wheeler, that's her enslaver in Washington, D.C., based on the real-life person, Mrs. John Hill Wheeler. Well, in the novel, she goes out to seek a position for her husband who's looking for a government appointment. All this tracks with what is there that we know of Hannah Crafts when she's living with that family. In the novel, Hannah applies a powder to Mrs. Wheeler's face and a smelling bottle. It turns Mrs. Wheeler's face black. She has no idea that it happens. In the novel, she's punished for that. Now, this doesn't happen in real life, but what I was able to discover is Hannah Crafts was forced to go blackface minstrel performances with the Wheelers. They loved those things, and she'd have to sit in the balcony and watch these white people mock black people in slavery. When she has her chance to tell her story, she flips the script, and it's the white people who are blackened and mocked for their foolishness, right? And it's just amazing. She's using the paper that she steals and the alchemy of literary imagination based on real life to make a contribution to our literature to totally take apart the entertainment of white supremacy.
How do you think, and this is a broad question, I apologize, but how do you think her work fits into the broader expanse of American literature?
I think it's amazing. It's a foundational work in American literature, African American literature too. And I say that when you look forward to, and I write about this, what she's doing there, she gets access to works like Uncle Tom's Cabin, and this is when she's serving those female college students. And particularly strangely, this novel by Charles Dickens, which was very popular, Bleak House. And she gets access to that. And what she does with the white arts of these the dominant culture that she has to operate in, she finds what's good in there, like the powerful narrative devices, but she rewrites it from the perspective of an enslaved person. And what she's doing there really is, in a powerful way, is something we see amazing African-American artists doing, and even in her tradition as a novelist. When you look forward 150 years to Toni Morrison's going to study very closely Faulkner, but she's going to completely rework Faulkner in a way like we're astounded by. When I teach Morrison, my students are down with it. When I'm teaching Faulkner, not so much. I get the same thing with Hannah Crafts. If I teach the Bondwoman's Narrative versus Bleak House, students pick up. There's this. It's built. They know how to. Both Hannah Crafts is doing the foundational work that we're going to see in future novelists like Toni Morrison or Jesmyn Ward, who is this amazing contemporary novelist who does this kind of amazing work.
Yep. What do you make of the fact, though, that Toni Morrison was learned, Jesmyn Ward is learned, not so much for Hannah Crafts?
Yeah. I think there's definitely a learning curve that Hannah has to develop. It's in some ways even more profound in some respects because she's manufacturing this high level of literacy. You can see in the manuscript where she's using punctuation in a fashion that's not common. It's definitely somebody who's an autodidact, but the level of storytelling is astounding. It's why it was a bestseller in 2002. It's why when professors I know bring this in their classroom, it's the hit of their semester. That I think it goes back to your earlier question. There's astounding ability and reach for literacy that is there that we've been taught not to recognize in past from the enslaved generation. I think there's probably more stories out there that were buried just like this one that Dr. Gates helped discover.
Yep. How would you situate, I asked earlier how you situate this book in the broader canon of American literature, but how would you situate this particular work by Hannah Crafts, The Bondwoman's Narrative, in the larger frame of African American literature?
Again, I think it's really grounding. It's a foundational thing. We usually look to Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of a Slave, which was written in 1861, and that's written not far away from where Hannah Bond, originally born Hannah Crafts, lived. That foundational text of 1861, Incidents of the Life of a Slave Girl, has been astoundingly important to our study of African American literature. And before that, Dr. Gates discovered this, Harriet Wilson's novel, Our Nig. What we have here is a novel that predates those and demonstrates in dialogue, right? We have so little. It expands our understanding of the foundation of African American literature. It immensely enriches what we know of the recoverable past of this really high achieving literacy and literary ability of formerly enslaved people or black people.
Yeah. You have a quote. I want to close our conversation with this, I think, the 2 minutes I have left here. You have a quote at the beginning of your book, The Life and Times of Hannah Crafts, the true story of the bondwoman's narrative. Our guest is Greg Hekimovich, the author of this book. He did the work over 2 decades to discover who this woman was, this first black woman to write a novel in this country. But there's a quote in the beginning of your book that I love. I had never seen this before, was not familiar with it, but I own it now. I love it. And the quote says, autobiographies display the triumph of experience, but novels are acts of hope. Autobiographies display the triumph of experience, but novels are acts of hope. I believe that to be true. Now that you've turned me on to this great quote, but that latter part I want to probe just in the minute and a half I have left here. When we say that novels are acts of hope, take that and tell me how her work is in fact an act of hope.
Most certainly. So the most vivid way I can say this, she's taking the experiences of her life. They're autobiographical. They include stories of other enslaved people that she stitches into her story. But what's driving her is a sense of where her future can be. It's the imaginative arc that a novelist takes where you could write a happy ending. So when she writes her novel, her mother's taken away from her when she's 10 years old. Her mother dies in 1858. Right around the time that her mother dies and she's forever estranged from her, she's finishing her novel in New Jersey, and she writes a happy ending where she and her mother are reunited. And there's a way in which, as she was proceeding to tell this story, to engage the difficult and struggling lives of enslaved people, the act of hope was to imagine a better future and to create that in the novel like all novelists do. And there's a beautiful way, as I researched this, that what she was envisioning, she was able to acquire. She had to imagine a sort of freedom that she was able to reach and then joyously exclaim by being a novelist.
It's a beautiful act of hope, and I love that phrase. Henry Louis Skip Gates Jr. Brought many of us the story of this book, the bondwoman's narrative, but leave it to Greg Hekimovich to do the rest of the work and for 2 decades do the research to write this book called The Life and Times of Hannah Crafts, the true story of the bondwoman's narrative, and did the detailed research to discover the identity of America's first black woman novelist. And for that, I repeat, Greg Hekimovich, we are indebted and we are grateful. Thank you for the text. Thank you for your time, sir. All the best to you.
Thank you so much, Tavis. Great to be here today.
Good to have you on our program. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Thank you for joining us on this Monday. It is October 30th. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Well, Apple is hosting another product event today, a month after introducing the iPhone 15. The online-only event, dubbed Scary Fast, is expected to show off the company's next-generation Silicon M3 chip and the newest iMac computers. That event gets underway at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Jonathan Majors' latest film is being delayed indefinitely amid his pending domestic assault trial. Majors is currently involved in a domestic assault case with his ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari. The African-American actor was going to star in Disney's bodybuilding drama, Magazine Dreams, set to premiere in early December. Well, over the weekend, the film's release date was removed. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Get big savings and big rewards during Provember. Save $80 on the DeWalt 20-volt 2-tool combo kit and earn 3 times the bonus points. While supplies last, selection varies by location. Bonus points calculated before taxes and fees after applicable discounts, if any. Valid through 11/22, subject to change.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Want to save big on custom faux wood blinds, shutters, cellular shades, and more? Shop Blindster today and save up to 50% over comparable blinds from brick-and-mortar stores. Get custom blinds at low prices and free shipping at Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man.
All 4 of LA's major pro teams were in action Sunday. The Clippers and Chargers get a win. The Rams and Lakers came up short. The Lakers lost by 5 in overtime in Sacramento. The loss spoiled a monster game from Anthony Davis. 30 points, 16 rebounds, 3 block shots, and 2 steals. LeBron had 27 but committed 8 turnovers. The Clippers beat San Antonio by 40 at Crypto.com. 21 points from Kawhi Leonard, 19 each from Paul George and Russell Westbrook. The Chargers beat Chicago to improve to 3-4, 2 interceptions by the Chargers defense. The Rams lost by 23 at Dallas. They fall to 3-5. Quarterback Matthew Stafford may have suffered a broken right thumb. The Rams hope to know more about the extent of his injury later today. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Is your eyesight changing?
I can't read this anymore.
Don't lose hope. People just like you are working every day using Braille, screen magnification, speech technology, and other tools and blindness skills. Your eyesight may have changed, but your goals, they don't have to. We can help. Visit us on the web at blind.org. The National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.
1 in 4 Americans today are living with a disability. I'm one of them. People with disabilities are extremely talented, resilient problem solvers that have so much to offer. And we've got a trusted ally on our side, an organization we can rely on, Easter Seals. Easter Seals is leading the way to full equity, inclusion, and access to healthcare, employment, and education for people with disabilities, families, and communities. That's my Easter Seals. Make it yours.
Learn more and get involved at easterseals.com.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
It is indeed, and we've made it at least to the last half hour of today's program. We were saying a couple hours ago that we were going to try to squeeze an 80-pound show into a 45-pound bag. 7 guests on today's program, and so it's been quite the journey. But I've enjoyed every moment of it. I hope you have as well. And now we've arrived to the final 30 minutes of today's program. And in these 30 minutes, today, President Joe Biden issued a sweeping executive order on AI, artificial intelligence. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. And I'm delighted to have as a guest, talk about good timing, Dr. Joy Bowling-Winney, about the revelatory work she is doing to address the myriad challenges of AI, specifically facial recognition, which apparently is encoded with deeply ingrained biases. Her new book is called Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines. Dr. Joy Bowling-Winney, good to have you on this program. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's my great delight to have you. Speaking of unmasking AI and your mission to protect what is human in a world of machines, we're told by the White House and the president's senior official, the president believes that we have an obligation to harness the power of AI for good while protecting people from its potentially profound risk. The executive order includes new standards for safety, including requiring companies developing models that pose a serious risk to national security, economic security, or public health to notify the federal government when training the model, and they must share the results of all safety tests. The Commerce Department, this is important, will also develop guidance for content authentication and watermarking to label AI-generated content. So the president's stepping up efforts to sort of regulate AI, for lack of a better way of framing it. Your thoughts first about that, then we'll get into your work.
Absolutely. So I had an opportunity to meet with President Biden in June to specifically talk about ways in which the federal government could put in protections against algorithmic harms and AI discrimination. So this has been long awaited, this executive order, and is certainly quite welcome.
When you say welcome by you, given what you do, or welcome by the AI industry writ large?
I would say it's welcomed by the tech justice community. So organizations like CDT, the Algorithmic Justice League, the Distributed AI Research Network, and the like, because for too long we've been operating in a wild, wild west where tech companies, some of them are taking data without permission and compensation and creating these large language models and other types of AI products. I will say it's overdue for people like Portia Woodruff, who was falsely arrested due to facial recognition misidentification and put in a holding cell 8 months pregnant. She reported having contractions. This was in 2023. Same police department arrested Robert Williams in front of his 2 young daughters and his wife. Again, AI-powered facial recognition misidentification failure. So I would say it's overdue, right, for the ex-coded, those who are experiencing AI harms now and have experienced it in the past.
Let me go right into your book. It's called Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines. We'll get to the human versus machines part in this conversation as we move forward. But what is to be unmasked about AI?
One big area that I wanted to unmask with AI is actually how these systems that are meant to be the most powerful technologies in the world, that are meant to push us to the future, are actually reversing gains made for racial equality, for gender equality. And I do believe that we won't get to the promises of AI if we don't address past historical, cultural, social bias that we continue to see being embedded and encoded into existing AI systems.
When you say reversing gains made, that demands a follow-up question, so you know what it is. What gains are we reversing that have already been made?
So I will say, for example, with hiring, right, with the EEOC, with anti-discrimination law, where you look at Title VII, where you're not to face workplace discrimination on the basis of sex, color, religion, creed, all of those things. And what we've seen with hiring AI systems that have been audited, we've seen systems that actually embed sexism. So, for example, Amazon had to scrap a hiring tool that they developed internally after they found they had a bias against women, and try as they might, they weren't able to take that bias out. Why is this happening? Because many of these AI systems are trained on past data. So if you have past hiring practices that have been discriminatory, you are encoding that bias into the future.
What specifically are Black folk to do? You mentioned facial recognition. I want to come right back to that. That's at the epicenter of so much of what you do. What are Black folk in the meantime and in between time, as we say, to do about the biases, specifically as it relates to facial recognition?
I would say we can take an example from the Brooklyn tenants at Atlanta Plaza Towers. They saw that their landlord wanted to install a facial recognition system, and they had questions, right, about what was going to happen to this data. Would it be given to police? Were these systems even accurate enough to truly work on the people who lived there, who were mainly Black, people of color, elderly, young, all the people where study after study shows these systems work the worst on, right, were made up a lot of those people who were living there. So I do believe it's important to remember that we have a voice and we have a choice, and so you do not have to accept the implementation of particular AI systems. So I do think it's important to continue to share our stories. I think it's also important to know that you have a right to opt out of facial recognition at airports as a U.S. Citizen. Many people don't know this. We ran a survey this summer of people who were encountering facial recognition scans at the airport. And oftentimes what will happen is the agent just says, step up to the camera, and you comply because you want to fly, but you actually can say no. And so knowing that you have a right to refusal, I do believe is important in those types of contexts. The other thing is to remember AI systems can be wrong, and so push back, contest decisions that have been made. For example, with generative AI systems able to produce essays and things like that, you have a bit of a cat and mouse game where companies or researchers will then create tools that are meant to flag people as cheating. What we've seen is these systems might flag people with English as a second language or different forms of expressing themselves as cheating, even though they haven't cheated. And when brown and black students are flagged as cheating because of the existing stigma, it's more likely to be believed. And so if there are disciplinary actions being taken against your children, do ask if AI systems were involved, because it could be that there's a case of algorithmic discrimination at play. We saw in the Netherlands a black student there, Robin, who was talking about literally having to put up extra lights to have her face be seen to be verified to take a test with some e-proctoring tools that the university had adopted. So don't think you have to accept the machine decisions.
Yeah.
There are so many examples of these machines going wrong. It's not just in your head. And we hear that from so many people when they see the film Coded Bias, which features the work of the Algorithmic Justice League, and they understand that, the computers can be wrong, and I don't necessarily just have to accept this.
Speaking of the machines going wrong or the machines being wrong, when we come forward, I want to ask what's wrong, what's missing in these systems. Is it just the absence of somebody black or brown in the room when this stuff's created, or is there something deeper here? What is it? I'm talking now specifically about facial recognition. What is it about these systems that can't accurately, capture or our images? I'm curious to understand that a little bit better. Our guest, Dr. Joy Bowling-Weeney, author of a new book, and we'll talk more about it when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or whether anyone cares about them.
But the reality is, 1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis and giving them the support and tools they need to succeed in life. To learn more, go to covenanthouse.org today. Thank you for caring.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Attention small landlords who own 12 or fewer residential rental units. The City of LA Emergency Renters Assistance Program is back to help small landlords and is now accepting applications. Apply for up to 6 months of rental arrears for low-income residential tenants behind on rent. Applications will be accepted until October 31st, 2023 at 6 p.m. Go online 24/7 at housing.lacity.org or call 888-379-3150 to see if you qualify and apply today. City of LA Small Landlords. This program is for you.
Made fresh daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Dr. Bowling-Weeney, when it comes to facial recognition, what are they getting wrong and why are they getting it wrong?
So when it comes to facial recognition, I think of two areas. One, how accurate are the systems, which is a technical question. And then two, how are these systems being used? right, which is a societal question. And so when it comes to how accurate are these systems, what my MIT research showed with facial analysis systems from Microsoft, from IBM, from Amazon, some tech giants, was that they did not perform as well on the faces of darker-skinned individuals compared to lighter-skinned individuals. They performed better on the faces of men than women, and they were especially terrible on the faces of women of color. And going to your question, why is this happening? We have to start with, how are machines trained to detect, classify, or recognize faces? And it comes down to training data sets. So when I examined some of the data sets that were actually being used not only to train these systems, but to evaluate how well these systems work, they were what I would call pale male data sets, right? You might have a data set that's considered a gold standard that's over 70% male and 80% lighter skinned individuals. So it means that within my field, people thought they were making progress in a universal way, but the measures for success themselves were skewed. So what my research did was say, let's include more black faces, let's include more women, and let's see what happens to the test. I made a slightly harder test. And on that,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so on that test, what we saw is that the data that was being collected to evaluate these systems, and then later on looking at the data sets used to create these systems, were heavily skewed. And so that's part of why some of these systems continuously perform worse on the faces of people of color.
Yep. Dr. Bolawini is a bit modest. Let me tell you a bit more about her time at MIT. She mentioned being a graduate student at MIT. Indeed, she was. But while she was there, she was horrified to learn that the face tracking AI software for her research experiment was unable to detect her own face due to the color of her skin. In order for the program to work, she found herself forced to code in a white mask. This is her story. She was coding in a white mask and realized, of course, at that time that this coded gaze was just one example of how AI has been designed in ways that exclude and excode people of different races, genders, and more, hence her passion about the subject matter. Here she was at MIT having to code herself in a white mask because it couldn't recognize her own face. And you see why she's so passionate, once again, about the work. Her new book is called Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines. We'll talk about humans versus machines in our remaining moments with her. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA reminds you that when we fight, we win, and we don't black down.
LA Community Action Network, or LA CAN, was formed in 1999 when 25 residents of downtown LA came together and acknowledged the problems that existed in their community and made a commitment to do something about those problems, to stand together, organize, and become a force in the community that demands change. Civil rights and preventing the criminalization of poverty are their core projects. In addition, they take on women's rights, the human right to housing, and healthy food access. LA CAN also has projects focused on economic development, civic participation, voter engagement, and community media. While downtown LA remains their home base, with a particular emphasis on the Skid Row community, in 2007, they expanded their housing and healthy food access work into South Central Los Angeles. LA CAN believes that power for low-income people and people of color is achieved through a large, active, and well-informed member base that utilizes a multitude of methods to advance their messages and goals. If you'd like to join the Los Angeles Community Action Network and organize people to fight back against oppression, please visit cangress.org. That's cangress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Dr. Bolin, I got just a few minutes left here. I want to cover two more things right quick. One, I told the story of your being a graduate student at MIT. What was it like having to realize as you're researching that you yourself had to code in a white mask?
I mean, at first I was, I felt like I was in a film because you couldn't make it up. I had this white mask because it was Halloween time. So the last thing I thought I would be doing is coding in white mask, in white face, really, at the epicenter of innovation. So there was a part of me that was amused, but there was another part of me that got curious. Why was this happening? Was this just me? And if it wasn't just me, what does it say not just about computer vision, but the development of artificial intelligence as a whole?
In that regard, I'm glad it happened to you because it inspired you to do the work that you have done and continue to do. Your book, again, is called Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines. And I think I want to offer this as perhaps the exit question. Can we? Is that possible? To protect what is human in a world increasingly of machines?
I absolutely believe in that. That is why we built the Algorithmic Justice League. That is why we fight for the X-Coded. That's why I commend the current administration for the executive order on AI, and also what we're seeing happening with the global conversation on AI governance. We can get this right. It's not too late. And we also can get it right where it doesn't have to be built on a foundation of oppression or data colonialism. So that's what makes me excited, because there's still time to change the trajectory of AI so technology serves all of us and not just the privileged few.
I don't know if there's, speaking of the privileged few, I don't know if there's any data on this or not, but in my own informal, unscientific research, I still don't have a handle, maybe you do, as to whether or not black folk writ large are still skittish, still a little scared, standoffish about AI, or are you seeing examples, are you seeing data that suggests that we are starting to embrace this a great deal more? I think about, for example, crypto. Black folk have embraced, no matter what one thinks of it, black folk have embraced, that is, cryptocurrency at a higher percentage than white folk, believe it or not. The data is incontrovertible in that regard. There are many who think that black folk are being played in that regard, but the data is the data, that black people at a higher percentage have embraced this notion of crypto. When it comes to AI, are we embracing it, or are we still a little skittish about it?
I definitely think it depends on the sector. What I am seeing is Black people are the first ones to talk about justice, to talk about rights, to talk about discrimination. We see that within the leadership of people pushing for tech justice. But as far as our overall inclusion within the tech sector, I'm less than 1% of Black women, right, who graduate with a PhD in computer science. If you look overall, we're less than a percentage point. So the underrepresentation is severe. and we are needed. Look what happens where we're not in the room.
Yep. Nope. Fair enough. Underrepresented you are, but I'm glad, and we are glad that you are there. The book is called Unmasking AI, My Mission to Protect What is Human in a World of Machines. That book is authored by MIT-trained Dr. Joy Boland-Winnie. Good to have you on the program. Congrats on the book, and all the best to you in the years ahead as you continue your research.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Research and your fight for justice, I might add. Thank you for your time. There it is, 3 hours gone. We got that 80-pound show in that 45-pound bag. It wasn't easy, but I thank all 7 of our guests on today's program. Back here tomorrow, hopefully not with 7 guests, to do it all over again. Until then, thanks for tuning in. And as always, keep the faith.